is April 28th, 2020, and it's your girl, Nicole, from your social media here at 4C. And we are doing our Facebook Live tonight for you guys. I'm so excited. It is Rec Month at 4C. We always try and highlight some of the recs that are around South Florida, but we sometimes go out of the South Florida region and get some perspective on what recs look like outside of South Florida, like in North Carolina. We had a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to look at some of the recs around the world that are pretty neat and interesting tonight. So a couple of things to make sure you guys know what we're up to. If you go to our website, go to www.force-e.com, and if you go to our shop page, we have great sales right now on the items that you need to dive on recs. That's reels and lights, guys. We have great sale prices on those items. Big blue lights, they're never on sale, but they're on sale this month. So go over there, check out what we've got. And because we haven't been able to be open to the public, you guys missed out on our wetsuit sale. So we're going to extend our wetsuit sale because everybody needs a wetsuit when you're diving on a wreck, right? Even though right now in South Florida, the water temp, it's almost in the 80s, guys. So nice. It's very, 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 very warm, but we still need to have a wetsuit when we're diving on wrecks just to make sure that we protect our body. So we're going to extend that sale. So go ahead. You can shop online. We will ship it to you, or we can do curbside pickup. All right. So we've got two options for you, and we want to get that sale to you. So go to that website, www.force-e.com. and go have fun shopping. Some other things I wanted to just mention is if you're or if you're watching us live right now, we would love to know that you're watching. So give us a thumbs up or the little heart or even the smiley face emoji. We'd love to make sure that we see you're on our live feed. And also if you could give us some comments throughout the presentation if you have any questions. Our guest presenter will wait and answer the questions at the end of her slides. So while we're doing that, make sure you get those questions in. We'll get those answered. And give us thumbs up, like I said, throughout the presentation and let us know that you're really enjoying it. So you didn't want to be on this live feed talking to me, right? No, you came here because you wanted to see who our guest presenter was. Well, when I thought about who is somebody in the world that we could get to do a live feed during this time period, I said, you know what? I would love to hear what my friend Jill has to say about the wrecks that she has explored throughout the world. So we have Jill Heinerth, and she is here to give your presentation. So take it away, Jill.
All right. It's great to be here with you. I'm sure most of you are used to hearing me talk about caves, so this will be a little bit different for a change. I'm actually just going to hit a little screen share here so that you'll be able to see some cool pictures while I talk. And I'm just going to run you through some of my favorite wrecks around the world. But like I said, you probably know me from caves. Caves are really my very favorite environment. These are a couple of shots from the Abaco blue holes. And some of you might know that I've done some of the deeper and longer penetrations for cave divers around the world and been to some pretty unusual places like inside icebergs in Antarctica and shooting and working with scientists all around the world. But what we came here for today was wrecks. So let me start with that. I really cut my teeth on wreck diving because this is where I learned to dive. In fact, this shot right here, this is the very first dive site I was ever on in Tobermory, Canada. So I'm from Canada. I live near Ottawa, near the nation's capital right now, but I learned to dive in Tobermory. And if you were up here right now, you'd know it's still pretty chilly. We haven't quite had spring yet. In fact, on my hike today, there was still a bit of ice and snow in the woods where I was. So up in Tobermory, the ice is out, but it's still pretty chilly. But it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And it's part of the Great Lakes. And in the Great Lakes, we have 6,000 shipwrecks in fresh water, mostly ranging from 1 to 200 years old, wooden vessels. and really cool places. Like, again, this is one of the sites of my very first open water dives. Like on my open water weekend, I did 4 different wreck dives. This is one of them here too, a little tugboat in Tobermory. And in fact, Tobermory is part of Fathom 5 National Marine Sanctuary. When I learned to dive, the viz was terrible there. I mean, we were lucky to have 5 feet of viz on many good days. But now we got invaded by zebra mussels, these tiny little mussels that have filtered all of the Great Lakes and made for some absolutely beautiful visibility nowadays. So we have these old wooden wrecks, and then we also have a few artificial reef sites like this one, the Niagara 2. The water, as I mentioned, is stunningly clear now, and so it's become a real tourism hotspot. In fact, this wreck here, the bottom of this wreck, the stern of this forest city, is at about 140 feet deep. And when I started diving, you certainly could barely see the wreck, let alone you would not see the surface. But as you can see on the Forest City railings here, these are some of the zebra mussels that have attached to the wrecks, and they're throughout all of the Great Lakes. They're not as dense on some of the deeper wrecks, but that's why we have clear water now. It's not great for the environment, but it's certainly been decent for the underwater photographers. And as you can see, absolutely stunning and, largely intact. A lot of these wrecks are largely intact. After I sort of decided to make diving a full-time career, I moved down to the Cayman Islands. I was actually in the Cayman Islands before this wreck was sunk, but just gives you a sense of some of the great wrecks that we have in tropical waters. This is the Kittiwake down in Cayman, or the Limon down in the Dominican Republic. So there's a lot of terrific wrecks in tropical environments. But I always seem to come home, and one of my very favorite wreck diving places in the world is Newfoundland, Canada, because we can dive on World War II wrecks. We can dive in an iron ore mine, which is kind of like wreck diving inside of a cave. And we dive with whales and icebergs also, so a lot to do. Newfoundland is way out on the eastern edge of North America, and it's the site of 4 really spectacular wrecks that were sunk by German U-boats in World War II, and it's called Bell Island, this small island off Newfoundland. Stunningly beautiful environment topside. It kind of looks like the coast of Scotland a little bit, and quite clear but cold ocean waters. We have some fantastic diving support there through Ocean Quest Adventure Resort. They have a boat that's got a little elevator lift, so whether you're wearing recreational or tech gear, you can just get raised and lowered into the water, which is just awesome. And like I said, beautiful topside vistas as well, and good shore diving and shore wreck diving locations as well. But the Bell Island wrecks, these 4 very special wrecks, were sunk in 1942 in 2 different sinkings in September and November from German U-boats. And these wrecks are largely intact and really big and covered in life. So terrific marine life, both coating the wrecks and swimming around the wrecks as well. In fact, this sort of king post from the wreck is just solid anemones. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Now, to dive in Newfoundland, you got to get into the cold water, because the temperature here is about 28 Fahrenheit at its coldest, and maybe in the mid 30s later in the summer. But it's really worth it. I think anybody that goes there will tell you it's worth it. This is just an example of a torpedo hole that's been ripped through this one wreck, the PLM 27. And here's the Lord Strathcona. You can see the historic ship and what it looks like today. Still, again, largely intact, but these do change year to year. because the icebergs roll over them every spring, and as they do that, they do damage the wrecks every year. This is a gun you're looking at, so it's literally sprouting salvos of anemones instead of artillery, which is really beautiful. But even with the ice damage, these wrecks are really largely intact. There's so much to see on the outside of them. Like, this is another gun here. There's so much to see on the outside of them that we don't actually spend a lot of time inside, although there are still lots of artifacts and things inside. It's just that they're so incredibly beautiful outside. This shows you the actual German U-boat that accidentally struck this one as it was trying to dive and go under the wreck. But because it wasn't too deep, it sort of missed and damaged the conning tower at the time. Apparently, the German captain that sunk the vessels in November was quite remorseful about taking these wrecks. They were run by civilians. They were iron ore carrying vessels, and he had been, driving around in the U-boat and in Newfoundland, really admiring the landscape, and felt really bad about sinking these ships. This is the deepest one, the Rose Castle, and as you can see on the right, we still have a really largely intact Marconi radio room. So this is the radio room the guy would have been in as he was asking for help on the radio. A couple of years ago, my colleagues and I were dispatched to retrieve the sextant that one of our team members found, and to bring that back for Museum of Cultural History in Newfoundland. In Canada, we have very, very strict rules about protecting wrecks. We don't take anything at all from wrecks. And it's very much against the law, but also, culturally, we protect those wrecks. So it's only through permits that can take years to get that you might be asked to bring back a particular artifact that could be otherwise subject to potential looting. And so we've had to do that a couple of times for some pretty cool things. And the sextant was a pretty neat one to bring back. Again, here's another stern deck gun, still in great shape. And in fact, you can even see when you get close to this particular gun, the brass maker's plate. You can still go and read that. So pretty amazing, colorful places. We get a variety of visibility from, I've seen anywhere from 30 feet to more than 100 feet of visibility on these wrecks, and sometimes just covered in swarms of fish. Sometimes we'll even get, cruised by a minke whale or other animals. This is another torpedo blast hole in one of the wrecks, and just an example of some of the life that's just coating absolutely everything on these wrecks. Now, the wrecks were carrying iron ore from the Bell Island mine, which is right ashore from where the wrecks are sunk. And diving in that mine is just like wreck diving inside a cave. It's very, very cool. We walk about 600 feet down to the water through a dry part of the mine until the rest of the mine is submerged. And there are 9 square miles of passages inside this mine. And we're literally following like the industrial archaeology, all the artifacts that were in this mine. Like, this is a turpentine can just sitting on the floor. But we also see big pumps, things that would have been used to de-water the mine itself. And all of these huge mechanisms are pretty interesting to check out. And we still treat it like a cave. So we run a guideline through the passages, sometimes tying off on some of these items as we go. But that's just so that if we lose visibility, we can follow the guideline all the way back to where we began. We see things like this. These are wheels that were on an ore carrying cart. So there are actually like railway lines through this whole mine that we're following along, and just equipment and personal artifacts everywhere. So this is just an old bucket. Um, this is one of the larger pump systems that would have been used to take the water out of the mine. And we also see inscriptions on the walls. So the miners, just to pass the time, I mean, they did graffiti basically. On the right, you see this little caricature and the name James Bennett. So this guy probably painted this with lamp black, like the soot from his cap lamp. And I figured he might have been one of the people that had died in the mine, but not the case. He doesn't seem to have died. But right around the corner of this pillar, I found a box spring mattress and an old lunchbox. So I think James Bennett was like spending a bit of time napping in the mine. But we also see like other names, sometimes names of people that did die in workplace accidents. And on this slide, if you look in the way upper left corner, there's a tiny little white cross. And every time a man died in the course of working in the mine, they painted a little white cross on the wall as a memorial to him. And underneath the diver here, there's actually railway tracks. So this is one of the places where these iron ore carts full of tons of ore would have been running downhill. And we think that this particular fatality, he probably got hit by one of the ore carts. So lots of interesting equipment, and these memorials make it just a fascinating place to dive in. And then back out where the wrecks are, sometimes we also dive on the icebergs. So right now, for instance, and even into June, sometimes even into the beginning of July, we get really large icebergs cruising through there, and we dive in and around and underneath these big floating giants of ice, and pretty beautiful environment. But let me take you next down to Truck Lagoon. This is I was just there in January, actually into February, so just before everything shut down. I was the last group that got into Micronesia, because the day after we got into Truck Lagoon, the Federated States of Micronesia closed the country to any people coming from a country that was affected by the coronavirus. And that meant that hundreds of divers got stopped in Guam and were unable to continue on to truck for their vacations. So I feel pretty fortunate to have been the last group there. And they're still shut down there. They're not letting anyone in. But let me take you on a little tour of some of the wrecks of Truck Lagoon. This one is the Imperial Japanese Navy Fumizuki, and this is they're all large ships, actually. They're all massively large ships that were sunk in Operation Hailstone by 500 U.S. bombers, pretty much as a revenge for Pearl Harbor. In fact, the Japanese think of the Operation Hailstone and the sinking of all of these ships as their Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Pearl Harbor, because over 5,000 people were lost on these particular wrecks. And like the wrecks in Newfoundland, these have become magnets for biodiversity, absolutely beautiful environments where you jump in the water and you feel like you're on a reef, not a wreck. It's so covered in colorful stuff. And the cool thing is that the water temperature is a whole lot better than Newfoundland. It's well into the 80s when I was there in January. Here's the Nippo Maru, and again, another huge vessel. It sits in 150 feet of water. There are wrecks in recreational and technical depths in Truck Lagoon, so it doesn't matter whether you're a recreational diver or a technical diver. There is absolutely something for everyone in Truck. The Nippo is pretty famous because of this particular um, spot where you can see the telegraph, um, and a lot of people have taken shots of this, all encrusted in beautiful, beautiful color. This would have been the ship's wheel, but the wood has all rotted away here, and so just the ring, the metal ring, is left. The San Francisco Maru is a really popular one. Again, enormous, enormous wreck, and the seabed gets you down, 200 feet-ish, close to 200 feet. But there's so much to do at every depth. Even the wrecks that sit deeper on the bottom have so much to do on the top sides. They're really beautiful. This particular gun, I think, is absolutely stunning, and we took the moment to head down the line and backlight it just so we could really show off the beautiful color of that gun. But there's a lot of cool stuff inside, like these things that you see on either side of the diver are stacked up beach mines. So there used to be an entire hold full of mines, and actually some of those were salvaged and used. So certainly these could still explode. I mean, there's still ordnance, but a lot of them were removed. The cool thing about this wreck is the outside, again, stunningly beautiful, covered in life. And if you get out in front of the bow and look back, you can get, because of the clear visibility, a really good view of the entire ship. The Ikoko Maru, again, Maru means like merchant ship. So during World War II, a lot of the merchant ships were basically taken over by the Imperial Japanese Navy. They didn't have enough warships, and so they got everything they possibly could get their hands off: transport ships, cruise ships, work boats, all kinds of things, and converted them to use and duty for the war. The Ikoko Maru is the only one that we actually have a shot. The black and white shot here is of the moment that it was being bombed in Operation Hailstone. So half of this ship was actually vaporized. It's not even there. Really, only about half of the ship is sitting on the seabed, but still reasonably intact, the part that made it. And this is the part that made it. This is the back of the ship as you come down. This is about, I think it's about 165 feet deep here. The Fujikawa Maru looks a little bit different here. Again, another enormous boat, 437 feet long, and full of all kinds of stuff. You could do dozens of dives on each one of these wrecks and see, guns and tanks, and then small things, compressors and lights and medical kits and gas masks and all kinds of other things. Again, the Fujikawa gives you a chance to get out in front and shoot back at the wreck and see just how it's become its own artificial reef. It's just beautiful. I could spend an entire dive just shooting some of these exteriors, especially when you can see the visibility is so good. Inside one of the holds, this is my dive buddy Pam. We've just dropped in through the hold and are starting to look around for some of the smaller stuff. We went on the Truckmaster live aboard with the Dirty Dozen. So we just had 12 divers on the boat, which was awesome. Only one was open circuit, 11 were CCR. And I'm planning on going back in January of 2022. And this time we're going to do half open circuit and half CCR divers. Inside this wreck, again, you can go into these little areas like workshops and see everything just as it was when it went down. So old bottles and tools and light fixtures and medical kits. This is a big compressor. It kind of looks like R2-D2. In fact, we call it R2-D2. And that's my buddy Pam behind it. So we've gone like into a hold and then sort of into a little side passage in order to photograph that. The high-end maru, this is one of the most popular ones in the lagoon because the top of it is in about 30 feet of water. Like right here, where you can see the name on the side of the boat, is only in about 30 feet of water. So really shallow. And yet inside, some of the penetration dives that you do are absolutely incredible. And this was a cruise ship, like an ocean liner. So really interesting. This is a little bit of effort to get into, but in the engine room, you can swim through and get to this telegraph. There's actually a second telegraph, like directly over Pam's head there, and just gauges and lights and bells and whistles everywhere. And in other parts of the high-end Maru, there's just artifacts everywhere. Some of the guides over the years have uncovered, I guess, picked up a few things and kind of set them out in little displays. So I doubt this kind of went down with this stuff sitting as it is, but pretty cool to see anyway. And then again, the exterior of the vessel is just covered in marine life. And there are plenty of opportunities to either go deep into engine rooms and really poke around, or just go through some of these swim throughs and see some of the places that are still have cascading light pouring into them. So pretty neat environment. These are some really large shells underwater, and we find like giant gun barrels, giant shells, ordnance, all kinds of things. We find torpedoes with propellers, lots to see. This is the Hokai Maru, and the thing that really attracted me to the Hokai Maru is that I wanted to go down and photograph some of these trucks, because there's trucks and old tanks inside some of these wrecks. This is the outside of the Hokai Maru, and then here's the trucks inside one of the decks. So there's, oh gosh, probably 6 or 7 old trucks, some tanks, a lot of other really interesting equipment inside this wreck. You have to be really delicate moving around because there's a lot of silt in this one. And so it's tough to get your lights set up and get the shot that you want. And the Fujisan Maru, if you just dropped in here, you'd think that you were diving on a wreck. And sometimes that's exactly, on a reef. And sometimes that's exactly what it feels like when you drop down and you just see this incredible mound of life. This wreck's on its side, and so this is one of the king posts from the wreck sticking out. So it's now horizontal instead of vertical, and just constantly had swarms of fish just circling around it all the time. But you go inside this wreck and you'll find things like this. Just, oh, now that it's on its side, it's like a wall of cases of bottles. So wooden cases full of old bottles, and it's just like floor to ceiling. But it used to be all on the floor, so pretty cool. So those are the pictures I brought for you tonight, and because I wanted to have lots of time to talk and answer questions with people, and just share a little bit about my book too. We're going to give away one of my books in a few minutes, but I hope you might be interested in reading it. It's My Life as a Cave Diver, My Adventures, and Trials, Tribulations, and a lot of the book is about how we face fear. And you can find it on Amazon as a hardcover, and audiobook, ebook, anything you like. Amazon all around the world. So let me go off screen share, and then I can answer some of your questions. Cool. Nicole, you're with me now?
Hi. We do have some questions here. We have one. A guy named Brian wants to know, what type of exposure suit is best for Truck Lagoon?
I just took a 3 mil wetsuit. I wore a Fourth Element Proteus, but 3 mil was plenty. Definitely take a hood, because you're going to be inside wrecks and places where you might, could potentially bump your head. but a 3 mil was plenty. There are a lot of people that take dry suits, and I think they just do it because they feel the dry suit's more comfortable for their CCR buoyancy. But I would die in a dry suit there. Yeah.
Awesome. And in the same region, someone's asking, what does it take to go to Chuck Lagoon? Like, what are the flights from the U.S.? Like, how do we get there? The logistics? Is there certain operators that you're?
Yeah, it's a long series of flights. Actually, the best way. This is the best tip. United Airlines is the one airline that connects all the way through from many places all over the United States. And what you should do is sign up for a United Airlines Explorer credit card. So the United Airlines points credit card will give you enough points as an introductory offer to get the flight for free. So, I mean, you have to spend a little money on the credit card, but God knows we're all using our credit cards lots these days, right? So that's a really good way to get a free, $2,000 worth of flights to get there. I went through from Ottawa to Newark. I went through Tokyo, Guam, and then into Chuuk. And on the way back, I came through Hawaii, San Francisco, Detroit, and then home to Canada. So you can go either way. But I would definitely do the United thing because with one airline all the way through, that's the cheapest way for baggage. And they have the biggest airplanes, so the most baggage allowance as well.
It's actually funny. One of the questions is, what should you pack to go on big dive trips that you're going to go and dive wrecks?
Yeah. So definitely connect with whoever, the operator is, land-based, or I went on a liveaboard, which I highly recommend. Truckmaster liveaboards were amazing because it's small. But just being on a liveaboard and being right on top of the wreck and dropping in is incredible, rather than having to drive in boats from shore, especially if you're doing the technical thing with all the extra gear. But just connect with the operator before you go to find out what you need and what they have. So for me, they had tanks, they had Sorb for rebreathers. So they had all that kind of stuff. They had lots of extra tools. I didn't need to worry about that. But you definitely need to take, basic things like your own reel, take your own surface marker buoy. In fact, take two. So in other parts of the world, not so much in North America, we use an orange surface marker buoy and a yellow surface marker buoy. And one will indicate I'm okay, and one will indicate, hey, I'm on deco. Could you send someone down? I need something, or I'm having a big problem. And so buy two. That way you also have a spare. So those are important. And I would take, the basic stuff, whistle, signal, mirror. Think about a tracking device if you want. Those are really worth their weight in gold the time that you actually need them.
Yeah. And actually, someone's trying to follow up on that question. What about camera gear? Should they downsize and just take little GoPros, or should they really take their big rigs, and how do you pack those?
So I took a lot of camera gear. I took my
That's why you have beautiful pictures.
Yeah, I took a Canon 5 Mark IV in an Aquatica housing. I took lights with that instead of strobes. I decided I'd use continuous lighting instead of strobes. And I also took a video camera too. I took my GH4 Panasonic, and I took Paralens diver cameras. So anything goes. We had people on the trip with GoPros, but almost everybody had something. And it's hard to imagine going to such a beautiful place without a camera. If it's too task loading for you, like if you're too early in your career and you're worried about distraction or task loading, take a GoPro and just, stick it on your head or something. But really be worth taking something. Now, with any camera at all, light is so key. I mean, the water's clear and it's bright there, but if you're going inside, you've got to have light. So you were saying you're having a sale on Big Blues, I guess?
We do.
There you go. So that's a great, great light. You need as much light as you can afford when you're shooting inside a wreck or a cave. It makes all the difference in the world.
Awesome. So now we're going to go back on stateside, and someone has a question about arranging dives to do Great Lake wrecks. How do you arrange it? Like, do they do one-day trips, or is it like you have to book a series? What does that kind of entail?
Yeah, so there are a couple people now who are doing technical rec charters, basically in Michigan, for example. Like Becky Kagan Schott runs a week-long trip. She usually does that in Michigan for some of the Great Lakes. Pete Mesley from Lust for Rust is now doing Great Lakes Shock and Awe, I think he calls it. So again, it's like a week on, well, they're land-based, but they go out every day with the same charter. But you can just go to places like Tobermory and just go out with some of the many operators there on day charters. Book before you go kind of thing, so you've got your spot. And then also in the St. Lawrence River, so the part that drains the Great Lakes out to the Atlantic, it's very popular and very warm. So in the summertime, the St. Lawrence, which is full of wrecks, is 78 degrees. So who knew in Canada, right? And there's lots of different operators and shops that do day charters and things. So yeah, you can go pretty casual, but do book ahead because we fill our boats up here. We love to fill our boats. Yeah.
Plenty of people who want to be doing these cold.
Yeah. Well, lots of shore diving too. Lots of shore wreck diving in Tobermory and the St. Lawrence, all over the Great Lakes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So I've got another question here asking, were the mines flooded on purpose? If so, and when?
So the mines were actually dewatered to mine. So the groundwater fills the mine. Like I said, it's 9 square miles. It's 1,800 feet deep. It actually goes under the island and then out under the ocean. So when they needed to mine, they had to pump the water out of it. And then when it became no longer economically feasible to mine, which was about 55 years ago, the miners went home over the Christmas holidays, and when they came back January 1st to go back to work, the mine was full of water because the operators knew they weren't going to continue operations anymore, and they let it flood. So now there's part of it that's still above the water table, so you can do these dry tours of the mine, and that's how we walk down that 650-foot passage to get to where the water is, and then you have to go underwater at that point. So I'll never get to explore it all. There's too much, too much to do.
Well, you seem like you love exploring. And the next question actually isn't about wrecks. Someone was just asking about, your caving passion and, how someone could get into that. What kind of training is needed for that?
So I've always loved caves. I did my first cave dive up here in Canada, actually, but I lived for more than 20 years down in Florida, right by Ginny Springs. So you guys aren't far from the absolute epicenter for cave diver training in the world, North Florida. So it can take a variety of time. Some people will just start with a cavern class just to check it out and see what they think. And then if they're hooked, go all in on the cave class. But it can take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks of complete 0 to hero, I guess, training. When you take a full cave class, you're going to need to have like advanced and nitrox and rescue, that kind of stuff, deco procedures when you get further along in the class. But it's a really fun, progressive experience, and given that I know a lot of you listening today may be living in Florida, it's pretty easy to access and quite fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of what you're learning in a cavern or a cave course, you can apply to diving on wrecks, because you're in an overhead environment when you go into penetrate a wreck, and the silt outs and low vis and using the lights correctly and how to communicate with a buddy is key as well. So
yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people that would take a cave class from me and they'd say, well, I'm not really interested in caves. I just want to do this to be a better diver, better wreck diver. And you really will, no matter what level of diving you come in at, you will become a way better diver taking a cave class. But what I've discovered is that most of those people who never intended to become cave divers get hooked. And for those of us that get seasick, caves have no waves, so and they never get blown out. So it's kind of a nice alternative.
Yeah, I was kind of following that they weren't closing down some of the Blue Grotto and Devil's Den. Like, they weren't closing them down during this pandemic, but maybe they're closed now. But yeah, they were staying open for a while because it's like they just diving is underwater and you don't have to worry about wearing a face mask because you got your gear on. So
yeah, I mean, the diving certainly lets you social distance, and yeah, underwater. Yeah, we don't have to worry about catching the virus underwater unless we're sharing spit. But the one thing to think about though is certainly up here. I have not been diving since we shut down, just because you don't want to stress the system really, and you don't want to have a car accident on the way to the dive site or a diving accident that could put you in the hospital. I think that's the last place anybody wants to be these days. So I'm sitting out until we open up a little bit further, and it's safe to assume that we're not going to be stressing the system. Because boy, the people that have been supporting us through this, from nurses and doctors to all the service workers out there, like, my hat's off to them. Now we know who's really important in this world.
Yeah, it's actually the next question is, what precautions do you take on wrecks that still have ordnance on board?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, this summer in Newfoundland, this past summer, we've been trying to have those wrecks designated as a National Historic Monument. And they said, yeah, it's a slow process, but in order to do that, the live ordnance needs to be removed. So last summer, the military came out and took it all off the wreck, and then took it out into a field and blew it up, which they had quite a lot of fun doing that. But I guess as a precaution, the reminder would be that it's still live ordnance when it's underwater, so don't touch it. There have been a few anecdotal stories over the years from wrecks, especially in the English Channel, where some things exploded underwater. I've never heard of anything where a diver got hurt, but I've seen stories about where wrecks became significantly altered, and everyone was like, whoa, it's a bit scary. So just don't touch them. Yeah. And then certainly, a wreck, if you're inside, is an overhead environment. So you should be using training and techniques suitable for the overhead environment.
So a lot of people keep asking, Jill, really, what wreck is your favorite wreck and why?
Oh boy. I don't think I could choose. I really don't. I can't even choose my own favorite cave. Although I have to say that trip that I just took to Truck Lagoon has to be one of my favorite trips of all time. Absolute trip of a lifetime. And I will be going back. January 2022. I figure by then everything will be normalized. I'm going back for sure. So I think in terms of destinations, it's got it all. I've always loved Newfoundland, but it's a lot harder to dive in the cold water.
Yeah. So they're also asking now, what cave is your favorite cave and why? And is there any caves up in Canada?
There are. Yeah, I have a cave really near me. I've got 10 kilometers of passage near me, and there are a lot of caves out in Vancouver Island and a few in Alberta and the Rocky Mountains. That's actually a real new exploration area out west in Canada. I would say my favorite cave is probably Dan's Cave and Ralph's Cave in the Bahamas, although Bermuda knocked my socks off too. again, they're all so interesting. They're all good.
When you're going to some of these caves, because they're in different countries, you have to get like granted permission, some kind of permit to be able to do that. And how does that process work? Can anybody go get a permit, or you're like, no, I'm here because I'm filming, or I'm here with some kind of research?
Yeah, I mean, there are caves that are open all around the world. There are caves with operators that act as guides for people that are cave trained. But yeah, a lot of exploration. I have to get a permit from the landowner or from the government entity. I'm doing a lot of filming for broadcast, and so we usually need film permits that take a long time. Sometimes permits can take years. I have dives that I'm waiting for permits on, and it can be a lot of work. There are even some caves in Florida that are only open for scientific permits, like Wakulla Springs, for instance. I've done some explorations there, and it's only for scientific permits. They don't even issue permits for just straight broadcast purposes either.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, my buddy Lance, who gave a presentation 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, he loves you. He was the reason why I was like, let me call her up and see if she's available to do a Facebook Live. And he has 2 questions here.
Yeah.
He wants to know, one about a cave. Have you ever dove caves in Budapest?
Oh, that's one of my bucket list caves, actually. There's some great caves there associated with hot springs, so like really, really warm water. So I'm hoping to get out there, but I haven't been there yet.
Yeah. And he wanted to know, have you been on the Empress of Ireland? I don't know what that is.
Okay, the Empress of Ireland is a sister ship to the Titanic, basically. More people died on the Empress than on the Titanic. It's in the St. Lawrence River in Quebec, Canada. And the ship went down in 13 minutes. So it was a huge maritime disaster. But because it happened during World War I, people's attention was elsewhere, and so there wasn't a lot of talk about it. It's in the water's about deco 45 degrees at the warmest, and then colder, depending on when you go. And it's a real historic site, so it's protected. But there are people that do guided trips out there, and there's a museum near there in Rimouski that's very interesting as well. So, yeah, that's quite a significant wreck in Canadian history. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you do a lot of like investigation about the history before you go do the dive sites. Like, how much do you go into the archives, and do you go and talk to other people about how they do the wrecks and the diving and the history?
Well, and I've had a lot of firsts too, where we find a wreck and we don't know what it is, and we need to figure that out, or we're going to a wreck that we know, but it's first time, we don't know exactly what to expect. So this, hopefully, anyway, if everything normalizes, I have an expedition this summer in Newfoundland, and we are going to do a bunch of different dives, but we're going to dive 2 U.S. Navy ships, the Truxtun and the Pollux, that sunk off the Burin Peninsula there. We know where one of the wrecks is. We're pretty sure where the second wreck is. So it's we've got to do a little bit of hunting. But these were really significant wrecks. So a lot of Navy men were lost. But again, when ships go down in the course of the war, they don't, back then anyway, didn't get much publicity. We didn't have the kind of media that we do today, and we also used to keep things quiet so people didn't get scared, I guess. But there were some really wonderful stories with the Truxtun and the Pollux about how the people in that area saved a lot of the sailors that were in the water and climbing ashore, because it was February in Newfoundland, and some of these guys spent 36 hours wearing just blue jeans and a shirt in the snow before they were found. There was one guy, Lanier Phillips, who survived. He was a son of a sharecropper in Atlanta, and he figured rather than getting uh, lynched by the KKK, that he'd have a better chance joining the Navy. But back in those days, you couldn't really totally join the Navy as a black man. You could be a steward to an officer on the ship. And so he was a steward. And when the ship started to sink, all the black stewards stayed on the ship because they were always told they should not leave the ship or they would be lynched wherever they were. So when Lanier finally got ashore, he'd been in the water and soaking wet in just street clothes, basically, for a day and a half when he was rescued by some women who started to scrub the oil off his body because he was covered in oil from the wreck. And as
he loved that, women scrubbing his body.
he woke up, he had no idea what was going on. They're scrubbing his body, and he's like, man, you can scrub all you want, but you will not get the black off of me. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm getting the oil off your body. And he's like, no, my skin is black. And they had never seen a black man before. And he was welcomed with such beautiful open arms by these people that he had an entire change of his life. And he eventually did end up being a sonar operator in the Navy. So amazing stories associated with those wrecks. And I'm really hoping I get to go there this summer.
That sounds great. So one person wants to know, do you have a favorite photograph that you've taken that it's like you took it and you looked at that camera during the dive and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see this on the computer and maybe in my house?
20 years ago, I led the diving team for National Geographic expedition to be the first people to cave dive inside an iceberg in Antarctica. So we traveled to New Zealand. We went 12 days across the Southern Ocean just to get into the pack ice. And then we were 2 months in Antarctica. And I shot an iconic photo of my dive buddy just swimming out of this iceberg cave. And I shot it on film. So at the time, I didn't even know if it was going to be a good photo. It was a lot different in those days, shooting 24 or 36 frames and not having any feedback whatsoever until, months later when I finally got home. And I would say that that's my most treasured photo. This one on the front of my book here is kind of a close second. This is the pit in Mexico that my husband at the time and I discovered the deep caves at the pit, and some people might have been there. And I got bent there, and I write about that in my book. And I went back in 2018 to shoot the cover shot of the book in the very location where I first experienced the symptoms of getting bent. So that picture's kind of special to me too.
And going right into, people want to know, is there any movies that have been made about some of these wrecks that they can be looking, like maybe documentaries that they can find if you know anything?
Well, I mean, you can go on my YouTube page and there's some short content and stuff. I've done a couple things about the Bell Island shipwrecks there. There's I'm trying to think of other wreck films out there.
Well, we know that Hollywood tries to make films, but they usually aren't.
Yeah,
they're a little interesting with their diver calls in the film. So it's like you're sitting there as a diver going, well, we don't do that, but okay. So I know it's hard in Hollywood to make a nice film, but if there's any documentaries that you're just like, yeah, you can see that one.
Well, if you want a fun Netflix, check out The Cave. I was the underwater unit director for The Cave, and it's a bit hokey topside. That the director's cut was way better before they Disney-fied it and took out the swearing. But the underwater footage I'm really proud of what we shot on that film. It was quite fun. So that's a good one. I just shot a documentary called Under Thin Ice that it's been airing around the world, and we had 2 weeks of free streaming in the US, but we don't have a US network yet, so it'll be coming. So you can watch for Under Thin Ice. In that movie, I swim with polar bears and tell the story of climate change, and had a chance to film narwhals, belugas, all kinds of amazing animals. Oh, I think we've frozen. I'm not sure if I'm with you still or not, but Nicole looks frozen. So I wonder if I should just answer some of these questions, because I don't know if you're still there or not. So let's see. Someone was asking about fear. Let's see. So a lot of things that I do are scary, and when something terrifying happens underwater. Oops, I think I've totally lost you now. I wonder if I should reconnect. I think I've totally lost you from your end. And I have no idea. Somebody in the chat if you're still there, somebody just type, oh, we still have you. Okay, keep going. All right, fear. We've lost Nicole, but I'll keep talking. So fear, when something terrifying happens underwater, how do I deal with that? Take a deep breath. Remove the emotions from the experience. So take a deep cleansing breath. Tell yourself, emotions, you won't serve me well right now. And then just think small. Take very small, pragmatic steps towards success. And that's the best way out of whatever goes wrong. Later, you can deal with the emotions. You can have a good cry afterwards, but in the moment, there's no room for emotions in an emergency. Okay, so somebody else can type a question, and I think I can just read them off the side here. Let's see. Oh, someone says, I liked The Cave. Oh, and also worked with Robert Bernardi. How cool. Yeah, we filmed a good part of The Cave in Romania. For many months, I lived in Bucharest, and we filmed in a studio there. And then we went to Mexico and filmed on location for a month with the crew for that movie. And we left the cast behind for the Mexico stuff. Okay, here's a question. How much do you keep the location of the wrecks you find secret from other divers? I only do that if it's something that's maybe potentially too dangerous for others to follow on, or by request of the landowner or operating entity. So, or by request of the person who's discovered it. So sometimes I get contacted by people who have found a wreck and they want me to dive it and document it. It's usually because it's deep, because if it was shallow, they'd already have done it themselves. And the deal is I can't tell anyone where it is. And then I've also been on trips where I get on the boat and I can't bring my own GPS or anything like that. And the understanding is that I won't collect the numbers for it either. So, yeah. Okay, so are there opportunities for macro photography? Yeah. It's so hard to choose. Do you take wide angle? Do you take macro for some of the life that's on these wrecks? With a wide angle, you can still get pretty close to things, but if you want to get some of the really, really small life, then you've got to, switch to a macro lens, which means, if the whale shark swims by, or if you want to take a picture of the whole wreck, you can't. So it's kind of a choice of one or the other most of the time. Sometimes I've been on jobs where I'm actually carrying both my cameras with me underwater. I kind of clip one behind me and balance it on the back of my butt and the back of my legs when I'm sort of hovering, and then use the other one, and then I swap between the two. So yeah, sometimes I do that. Okay, let's see. I'm scrolling for some more questions. Can you talk about what it was like diving in the iceberg? Okay. Um, so when we pitched National Geographic to go to Antarctica to cave dive, be the first people to cave dive inside an iceberg, the truth is that it was only a theory that we would find caves inside of these icebergs. We kind of figured it would be like limestones. I mean, limestone. The whole iceberg had cracked and broken away from the Ross Ice Shelf. It was the largest moving object on the planet. It was the size of Jamaica. And we figured if we'd been watching these cracks develop over the course of years, that there had to be all kinds of cracks in the ice, and that those cracks would get exploited by water that would erode them and give us a chance to swim inside an iceberg. So when we left for Antarctica, we really didn't know for sure. And when we got there, we had to sort of write the handbook for something that had never been done before. And icebergs are constantly moving and shifting and cracking and breaking and calving. And we discovered they were full of ridiculous currents that would come up out of absolutely nowhere. So it was really dangerous. But once we got inside and actually got to places where the iceberg was tripped up on the seafloor, we found remarkable gardens of life. So beautiful filter feeding organisms and color, something that I didn't expect going to an icy realm. Okay, so let's see. Any more questions? Nicole's still trying to come back, so hang in there because I know we're going to give away an Into the Planet book when she can get back on with us. Okay, loved Under Thin Ice. How different was shooting wild animals and being in the water with them? I would say that swimming with polar bears is the most dangerous thing that I have ever done, and I don't know if I'll do it again. So polar bears are enormous to begin with and evil. And the way you film them is we were working out of a 24-foot long canoe, a moosehead canoe with a motor on it. An Inuit guide's running the canoe, and he's got a rifle over his shoulder. Now, we have to have 24-hour a day, 7-day a week bear guards on alert when we're working in the Arctic because of the polar bears. They are constantly predating on you, trying to come into camp. They want to eat you. And when you're in the water, you look for a while for a polar bear that's maybe been swimming for a long time and doesn't seem as aggressive, one that's alone. And then you try and get in the water using the canoe to kind of block the polar bear's view. So he's pretty distant. You jump in the water, and then the canoe kind of moves out of the way, and then the polar bear sees your neoprene covered head just bobbing in the water and goes, yum, you look like a seal. And he comes barreling towards you at about 6 miles per hour, and he can swim for 10 days at 6 miles per hour without stopping. So really quite something. And the polar bears now are spending about 7 weeks more in the water rather than on ice and on land, where they would normally hunt. And so they're hungry, and they're learning to dive after things. So when they come towards us at the right moment, we try and descend, get underneath, and film from below. But the polar bears are starting to dive after us. So it's pretty scary, and I would not recommend it for anyone. And I don't know if I'll ever do it again. My colleague Mario Sear has been doing it for many, many years, and he's actually more scared of the walruses than the polar bears. I did get in the water a couple times shooting walruses on this trip too, and although I know they're highly aggressive and in a pack and everything else, for some reason, I just felt a little more comfortable around them than the polar bears. Okay, so let's see. Matt says, "Great to hear stories. Where are you headed next?" Gosh, that's hard to say. Like many of you, I've had so many of my plans change in the last couple of months. And so I've had a lot of projects and expeditions canceled and trips canceled. I've already missed a bunch, and a bunch that are in the summer are already written off just because the isolation right now, and who knows how travel will be restored in the future. So I was planning on Norway, Micronesia, Australia, all around this time, and hopefully I'll pick those up again when things normalize. I think my next trip is going to be hopefully this project in Newfoundland. We're doing a round the island expedition and doing the Truxton and the Pollux wrecks on that. If everything is safe enough by late summer. Okay, let's see. Another question. Any tips for packing a breather? Yeah, so packing. Oh, back! Yay! Okay. Packing a rebreather. Some people carry parts of them on carry-on, but I never. Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
So when you're at a location, you're not sure which plug is actually plugged into something that's gonna give your computer power. Yeah, I've been plugged in the whole time, but the outlet doesn't work. So yeah, totally went dead on me. I'm sorry, everyone.
No,
sorry.
I wasn't sure if it was you or me at first, and I didn't know, so I actually signed back on, and then I saw that people were actually still listening, so I've just been answering questions.
I know, I was on my phone, so there you go. All right, sorry, go ahead and continue.
Yeah, so packing a rebreather for truck or anywhere else, I pack it. I put it in checked baggage, but I've made a letter that's to the border control people saying, "Hey, this isn't approved. This is a life support device. It's safe for airline transport. I try not to travel with my tanks unless I have to. If you travel with tanks, they have to be without valves, with a piece of clear tape over the opening of the tank. And then anything that says the word oxygen on it, throw a piece of tape over that. And you should be okay." But I've traveled with my rebreathers all over the world. Many years ago, I lost one set of tanks when the Dominican Republic didn't like that. But other than that, no problems. Cool.
Go ahead and answer a few more, and then we can do the raffle because it shut down my my randomizer, so I got to put that back up.
So Steve Willenda says, "I made a switch to CCRs early in my career. Do you still dive open circuit?" Yeah. So I've been diving rebreathers since the mid 1990s, so probably longer than most people out there. I still dive side mount. I hate double tanks on my back. I actually dove side mount before I dove double tanks on my back. So I started on side mount like long before there were side mount rigs. But yeah, I dive whatever tool's right for the environment. But that for me is normally rebreather or side mount. Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's see. Should we do one more question and then draw some?
Yeah. Go ahead. One more question, and then we can go ahead and do this raffle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can finish Steve's question, I guess. So, how do you make the decision between the two? When I have to do tech dives that are deeper, I don't do any deep trimix on open circuit. I do that only on rebreathers because I think I've got more options. And then I use the breather other places where I want range, either distance, depth, or time, or I want to have a really remarkable experience with the ocean environment, because when you don't make bubbles, you have a completely different dive. When a dive is shallower, I like side mount better because the rebreather in shallow waters is finicky with buoyancy, and you tend to use more gas in shallow water on a rebreather than in deep because of the slight buoyancy changes. So yeah, it's a tool. I still love side mount diving, open circuit. So rebreather's not the be all and end all, and I love free diving too. So hey, all right,
All right, I think we are
time for
here.
a draw.
So, if you all remember the write-up for the presentation, I said that you had to get your name on the registration on our Eventbrite. So that closed at 6:45. So I actually pulled all the names off of there with your email, and I put it into a random name picker that's online. So we're going to go ahead and watch the random name picker go for it. So let me go ahead and show it in the stream here. Okay. All right, there it is. It might be a little too small. Let's see if I can rearrange it. Oh, well, maybe. All right. So are we ready?
Yeah.
Gonna hit the green button and see who wins the book signed by Jill herself. Whoa. Who is it? Who is it? Andre Gerber. Andre, you are the winner of the free Into the Planet book by Miss Jill herself. So we will go ahead and contact you to get your address so we can send it off. And you can either have it, written out to you, or if you have somebody else that you want to write out to, like your loved one or something. That's awesome. Yeah, thank you everybody for signing up for this live event. And I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but I think we can all say, Jill, you are so great at telling stories. It's calming voice, and on top of that, the cool stuff that you know about. It's not that you just dive them; you know about them, and I think that's what is really awesome about the presentation. And everybody's been writing in how fabulous, and thank you so much. Cool. And we appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to the 4C customers, and we hope that you can come down and maybe do a dive with us soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, it's been great to be with you all, and everyone please be well, be safe, and we'll get back diving soon. So take care, everybody.
We will. All right. Well, thank you, 4C divers, and we will see you soon. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.